Hello.
Hi,
Yes,
Saltines.
hello, Saltines. Thank you for joining us again this week.
Yes, thank you for joining us. We are here, and I don't know what the subject of this
We are we
podcast is
are
going to
we are
be.
here. So we are here at the shop, yes, to record more of our foolishness.
Yes, foolishness.
So I am all over the place with stuff that I want to talk about today, and
Great.
as usual, I'm the one that has put all the work into what we're discussing today.
Obviously.
So if any of you who are listening to this episode take issue with anything we discuss, please feel free to direct your ire toward me. Austin is, as usual, innocent. Look at this face. Isn't that an innocent face? So innocent. Okay. All right.
I feel good. My jaw's really tight.
Oh, I'm sorry. What have you been doing with your jaw, you hoe?
Um, Grinding my teeth in my sleep.
Well, stop.
You stop.
You have a thingy. Okay. Anyway, enough of our nonsense. So yeah, so I've got a few different things I want to talk about today. And some of this stuff is going to be, I think, a return to some of our saltier kinds of topics.
Yes, we've not been as salty as we
We
normally
really
have.
we haven't. We've been kind of on like a low sodium kind of a kick lately.
This is good for our health
And absolutely.
and yours.
And so, but today I want to talk about a few things, or at least a couple of things that I think are going to maybe come across as being kind of a little bitchy. And I'm not trying to be bitchy or salty or mean with this stuff, but these are things that I continue to see, like particularly like consistently lately. I'm seeing these things a lot, and I think that the way that I want to talk about these things is maybe going to potentially irritate some of our fluffier listeners.
Okay.
But trust me, that is not my intent. Okay, as is always the case, my at the bottom line, any of the information they share here is really meant primarily to educate, okay, and to give you a better experience in your own
To
practice.
dissolve misinformation through education.
Exactly. So I'm going to refer to my notes here. Okay, and you actually kind of jumped on me for this one earlier. I was mentioning this, and you were like, "No, don't say that. That's not right." So this will be one of the rare occasions where you'll see Austin disagree with me. And all I can say is, woe to Austin for disagreeing with me because he has yet to realize the consequences of this.
Mm-hmm.
But the first thing that I want to say, and again, this is something that I'm seeing a lot lately, I want to remind all of you who are magical practitioners, spellcasters, you're doing those kinds of things. I want to talk a little bit about what it seems to me, what it appears to me is becoming this trend lately with road opener workings. I've noticed a lot of people of late doing road opener workings. Okay. And it's not that those are new things. Road openers have been done for as long as we've worked magic, right? In different capacities or forms. And there's nothing wrong with road openers specifically, but I'm noticing that road openers are kind of becoming this catch-all way for people to do their spell work, and it needs to, I think, stop because there are better ways. It is often, I want to say, better for you and what you're trying to achieve in your spell work to do some additional digging into whatever the situation it is that you feel you need to do a road opener on, right? To do a little bit of additional digging into that situation and to maybe come up with a more specific way to resolve that spell or that situation through spell work, excuse me. Right. And so I guess really what I'm saying is it seems to me that there are a lot of people out there, maybe because they are either lacking knowledge, they're jumping on the trend, or maybe again, and this is going to be where this sounds a little bitchy, but they're just lazy spellcasters.
See, and that's the thing that I jumped on him for because he was like, "Runners are lazy." I'm like, "No, they're not."
It's not the road opener spell that is where I dropped the word lazy. I think that again, it just comes down to a lot of people. And I gave you some examples earlier, right? I
Yeah.
gave you an example of like, say, so somebody wants to do some sort of work to resolve some issues that they're having in a romantic relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And rather than just throwing a road opener at that situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's what it is. I think once again, this comes down to that idea that there's like a one spell fits all
Yeah.
kind of a situation, or
Yeah,
that
and I agree with you 100% on that.
that kind of thinking really bothers me because people who take that approach to their spell work sooner or later are going to, I think, become disillusioned with their spell work
Well, yeah.
because those are not going to be spells that, even if they do work, they're not going to be spells that are really going to work as effectively or as specifically maybe to manifest what that person needs. And so you're going to end up with this person that's going to be like, well, I'm doing spells, but the things that I really want, or the things that I need to happen, don't really happen. And so I just don't know if this is even real. I just don't know, and they give up, or they become disillusioned, right? And I hate to see that happen. So really, again, it comes down to the concept of results-oriented practice. And so when I say don't be a lazy practitioner, when it comes to road opener spells, do your road opener spells. But but in that example I just made a moment ago of like someone who wants to do a spell to ease some sort of issue around romantic connection, relationship in their life, right? You could throw a road opener at a relationship situation with the understanding that, or with the belief that that is going to remove what you perceive as an obstacle to the happiness and the balance in that situation. And that road opener, in effect, could actually just destroy your relationship. It opened the way for you out of your relationship, right? So it would be more effective, or it is more effective, to actually do a little bit of additional digging, to do some divinatory work.
Yeah, well, I agree with you 100% on that. 100%.
Damn right.
Because this is also something very similar to what we saw months and months and months back with tying two candles together with a fucking string,
or the big spell jar craze,
or this big spell jar craze, which is still huge. And an Abre Camino or a road opener or a blockbuster, these are not always going to be the need. These are not always going to be the result that you need, because when we actually look at things, and as someone who does consults and spell work for other people, sometimes like I'll pull cards, and the reason the magic that they've tried to work isn't working is because it doesn't need a magic fix. If you can have a conversation with it, then if you need to have a conversation with them, then just have the conversation with them. Okay. So because of that, some of the things that I do see when it comes to the laziness of just throwing a road opener at it is just that you're not sure how to handle the situation, and so these people are just throwing a road opener at it. Orange candle with some road opener oil, and boom. And sometimes that is all you need, but other times, like, there's more effective ways to go around that, and you can only clear so many obstacles before you have no more pavement or road.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I guess that's what it comes down to, is like I want people to not be lazy in their practice for reasons I already clarified. Also, I want people to get good results in their practice, and this is not the way you do that.
Yeah.
Would you clarify, since we're kind of talking about this, a little bit of a sidebar? Would you clarify for our saltines, what is the difference, or in what different kinds of situations would you maybe recommend an uncrossing over a road opener? Because I think that's another thing that people get confused.
Yeah, people get that confused a lot. An uncrossing is when someone has actually put a spell on you. So evil eye, a jinx, a hex, a curse, something like that. It is a cleansing on steroids, essentially. Whereas a road opener, it's not a magical block. It is other people involved. It is other egos. It is other just energies that are there that you're having to deal with. So road openers, you commonly find workings for when it comes to like job promotions. Like you're doing everything right at your job, and you're not crossed up, you've pulled cards, you've gone to see your practitioner, you're not crossed up, everything's working really, really well, but you just can't seem to get over it. You just can't seem to move past it. So that's when a road opener would be much more effective, because that road opener is going to kind of clear the obstacles for that promotion, whereas an uncrossing is just going to, remove any magical things that are on you that aren't there for the best.
So it could still be hindering you getting the job.
Right? It could still be hindering you getting the job.
It's a different way to handle it.
But it's a different way to handle it. Yeah.
So, okay. I was talking to someone in the shop like a couple weeks ago about this, because they were looking at the spell candles that we prepare, and they were like, do I need an uncrossing? Do I need a road opener? And I was trying to explain to them, like, well, is the source of the issue around you personally, or is it an external thing?
Uncrossings are external, whereas road openers are internal usually.
See, and I could see that kind of working the other way.
It can work the other way, but if you're crossed up, it's coming from an external source.
Yeah, well, and that's true. But I guess I mean, like, when you're doing, the effect of the uncrossing is going to be on you, where the effect of a road opener is going to be on something external.
Yeah,
that's kind of what I meant. Sorry.
Yeah.
I should be more clear. Okay, so stop doing the road openers. for just it's one of those, like, like if you need to fix a specific thing, you need to kind of pare down your magical work to the specific thing, and don't just throw just a big boom road opener out there, because road opener workings, while they are again, they've been around, they've been done forever, and they can be really powerful workings. Throwing a road opener at a situation without being more specific about what you really need to see achieved there, or having a clear idea of what that really is, you could potentially be asking for some magical fallout around that situation that maybe you really don't need. Like, like I needed this to be clear and open, but I didn't need this to be clear and open, right? So think about what you're doing with your spell work.
And if you don't know what you're doing, or you don't have the confidence, talk to a more well-learned practitioner.
A more well-learned.
A
more learned,
a more experienced practitioner.
The most wellest learnest.
I'm gonna hate you. Mike has been doubling me all day.
I have not.
He's been doubling me all day. He hangs his head in shame because he knows it's true.
I wasn't hanging my I was not hanging my head in shame. Oh, anyway, next thing. I'm noticing lately, again, popping up on a lot of like social media. And we've talked a lot before on the podcast about how social media witchcraft and like real world witchcraft are very different things.
Yes.
And the same would hold true for personalities. You're going to find that I think a lot of witches who spend a lot of time on the internet, and make the public image or perception of what they're doing magically, like that's kind of the focus of their work as witches. I find that their practices differ quite a bit from a lot of the rest of us who are actually like doing the work off camera. And I'm not saying that either of those situations is better than the other, but there's definitely a different feel. Like I will say social media witches just don't have the same vibe that like actual day-to-day real life witches.
I'll fucking say it. I'll fucking say it, because
sorry, I'm like having an allergic reaction. I think I'm itching.
Because the reality is you're only doing spells and putting them on your Facebook or your TikTok or your Instagram, and you're not actually doing any other spells. Like, what are you doing? Like, do you really? The fact that you have that much time tells me you're not actually doing the spiritual work. Now, you could be doing the spiritual work behind the scenes, but when all of your spells are a candle wrapped with a bay leaf twine and a pile of salt, like, yes, that's aesthetically pleasing, but can you expand more? No. Okay, because remember, intention's everything. Ugh.
He says sarcastically. Okay. Anyway, so I want I want to get to the point of what I was trying to make with this. So I've noticed a lot lately that there's this influx of like social media witches, like basically like snipping and fighting and picking at each other.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that'll ever be something that ever goes away, because just as we're witches, but we're also humans, and humans generally we just for whatever reason we just can't get along.
I find a lot of social media witches have very unhealthy egos.
Well, they do, and you have to think about that, right? I mean, what puts someone in a position to want to put themselves on camera? What gives someone the idea or the belief that like their position, their perspective, their views are,
as we say, on camera.
I know, right? It's hilarious because here we are, right? But I find though that, and I guess the distinction I make there is that when we're doing the podcast, when we're doing other things, like we really are trying to present information and educate.
Yeah.
And I guess the distinction is I see a lot of social media witches who are basically just like, look at me. How great am I? How smart am I? How cool am I? How powerful am I? And they're not really giving you any real information.
Yeah.
Is kind of the distinction, I guess. And so that's the issue, or that's the thing I see there. Anyway, but where I wanted to go with this is again, I wanted to talk a little bit and again, kind of just remind all of you that you need to be really careful about how you present and what you place the information that you put out there on the internet. Okay. And I don't mean that in any way to sound like fear mongering kind of concept, but I think a lot of times people betray themselves. They make it very clear to people who pay attention to what they're putting out there on the internet that it becomes real obvious really quick. Like if you're someone who is a social media witch and you're out there airing all your dirty laundry and picking fights with fellow practitioners and things like that. Like to the rest of us, not only does one that make you look like a clown, but again, as Austin mentioned a moment ago, that lets us know that you can't really be doing or accomplishing a whole lot of really good work as a witch or growing in the way that you need to be growing as a witch if you've got that time or that ability to be. We had to pause for a moment, and now I can't remember where I was going. Anyway, so I guess the point is again that you need to be really careful. Those of you who are watching or who are joining us today, be very careful about what you put out there, okay? Because that is perception, and there's a lot of power to perception, right? And I don't know about you. I won't speak for you on this, but I know, like just myself personally, if I connect with another practitioner of whatever capacity, whatever kind, online and over the course of like even just a few days, everything I see coming from them is I'm so powerful and my spells never fail. And oh, this practitioner is bullshit. And this practitioner and drama, 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 and petty, 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 and bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. I immediately tune out.
Well, I tune out and I block them.
And if that person reaches out to me for something, I'm not going to get involved because people who kind of work and kind of live like that, like sooner or later, they turn that on you. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's difficult that sometimes because you might, get to know this person and on off camera, like off screen, like they could be a normal person, but if that's all they're presenting, that still tells you like somewhere in there, like there's something up.
Yeah.
Right. Otherwise it's all just performative, which I think is sometimes even more problematic because then it gets difficult to tell where they really stand on pretty much anything. Right. So anyway, so I wanted to talk about that a little bit because I see this happening again. And I want to remind all of you that, you don't need to be broadcasting everything that you do on social media.
Well, you shouldn't be.
And you don't need to be airing your dirty laundry on social media.
Here's the thing.
And you should not be publicly, even if you have cause to actually pick a fight with another practitioner, you should not be doing that in a public forum. That is foolishness, and long term just gives whoever it is that you are potentially fighting or working against more power to use against you.
Well, also think of it this way. If you really are being attacked by this person and you're showing that you're returning to sender to them, they're going to find out one way or another, and it's just going to create a thing. So it's basically just high school drama, but with social media. And as a witch, I don't have time for that.
We should all be adults, right?
Yeah, I don't have time for high school drama.
I mean, to me,
I graduated.
To me, I think it even comes. It's to be honest, I guess in looking at this, it's really not even necessarily about the witchcraft. It's about just people. Just like don't be a dick. Don't be an asshole. Be a good person. Don't stir trouble. And if somebody is out there stirring trouble for you, do what you can to remove that person from your sphere of influence, right? And move on with your life. Right? To talk, to revisit, to go back and to continue to stir and to pick at those old kinds of wounds, to do that stuff. All that does all over time is just sap your strength, sap your energy, and still your focus. Right?
It saps your light.
It steals your peace at the very least, right? So, and I would hope that you would feel you deserve better than that. Gross. Ew. Ugh. Okay. One of our lovely students contacted us to ask us if we would perhaps talk a bit about the Greco-Roman deity Morpheus. And I actually thought this was kind of a good idea because Morpheus in recent years, I think has really kind of this is a deity, this is a spiritual figure that I think is really kind of very much in like the zeitgeist, like pop culturally. Like you see Morpheus, I think most recently, and they even mentioned one of the things that kind of put this on their, like on the kind of hit their radar with this is they were watching the Sandman series on Netflix, which I want to again be very clear is fiction, right? But it is based off of actual mythology and characters from mythology. So that's kind of, I think, just again an example of the most recent situation where this particular deity has kind of shown up, right? Again, within pop culture reference. But that's, I think, how a lot of people are coming to witchcraft and spiritual practice these days. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. It's not a bad thing, but we know that's how that works, right? I mean, we didn't really see the rise of the Asatru or the Norse pagan movement again here in recent years until we had shows like Vikings, Thor with all the Marvel movies and stuff, right? Like when all of those pop cultural like figures who again based on actual things, right, but very fictionalized, right, when they started to pop up and become more like visual in the mainstream, that was when people were like, oh, Thor, oh, Vikings, and then like that, and then we saw like a huge ramp up in the Norse pagan community, right? So it would make sense that that would work for everybody, right? All those different pantheons of gods. Okay, but so let's talk about Morpheus though. Okay, and I have some notes here because I wanted to make sure that I presented this succinctly, that I was quick in the way that I presented this and talked about this. But also, I've got some information here that I think is good to be clear about, because I think that because of a lot of that pop culture and fictionalization, that there is some confusion around Morpheus as a deity, as an actual mythological, as a god. Okay, so Morpheus, we understand or we know, is a god of dreams, right? But I think if you look at the stories that are told of Morpheus, like particularly the writing of Ovid, you're going to find that Morpheus was he was one of three brothers. He was the son of the god Hypnos, who is the god of sleep, or altered brain states that we associate with sleep. And he is actually the grandson of the goddess Nyx. And there were three of them. He had two brothers. Morpheus was the god of dreams that was associated with human dreams specifically, and his power was to actually place images of humans into the dreams of other humans. That was kind of what he did. So he dealt with the human complexities of dream time, where his brothers actually had other specializations. Like he had one brother that was kind of like all about dreams associated with like animal symbolism. And the other one, I think, was a brother that was all about like nightmares. Okay, although Morpheus is also a deity as a god that has power over dreams, and Morpheus is also a god of nightmares. Okay, like he can do both. Okay, one other interesting thing that I didn't realize, but it would make sense because his father, he is the son of Hypnos. His uncle is Thanatos, who is the god of death, or a god of death,
the eternal sleep.
Yes, exactly. Let's see. We already talked about him being kind of a very popularized character due to like more contemporary fiction and Western culture. But there hasn't really been much written about him. I kind of went on a little bit of a deep dive to try to find references and book sources for him, and really there really is not a whole lot of reference or mention of Morpheus. Though we know that he was acknowledged as a very important character in ancient Greece. He, as a deity, actually is considered to be like, he's extremely powerful. And it's so much so that his ability to put people into a dream state, to put people into sleep state, and to give them dream activity, like he was even able to put the gods of Olympus to sleep and influence their behavior with dreams. Like so he was very powerful. He was able to put to influence Zeus, the king of the gods, in that pantheon as well. So we know that he was kind of seen more as maybe like more of a primal kind of a god or deity, and he was again very powerful. He, in addition to being very powerful in that sense, he was also believed to be extremely powerful because the ancient Greeks, in their perception of how the world and the universe and the spirit realm, how all that worked, the ancient Greeks believed that the dream world was in essence kind of a mirror to the waking world. So Morpheus was seen to be a supremely powerful deity because his ability to control the dream world and to manipulate what happened in the dream world, that could actually, or was believed to potentially have actual effects in the waking world in reality.
Interesting.
And so he really, even though he kind of has like this very limited scope of what he does, that limited scope really had much greater potential than maybe I think a lot of people are aware of. So, so he's a very interesting spirit, and and unfortunately, because of the lack of a lot of of historical classical information and text about him, I think, to be honest, it could be a bit difficult, I think, to really go out and to find a lot of reliable resources. But in your own practice, what I would probably recommend is to maybe just to work to see what you could do individually, just personally, to invite him in to your spiritual work. Again, bearing in mind that this is a very primordial kind of a deity, and they can be a little intimidating, right? Their energy is very intimidating. It's almost like they're like even less human than like normal deities are, right? Just because they're so much older, right?
Yeah.
But how would you recommend like people could maybe incorporate a deity like Morpheus with that kind of being his resume, right? How could we see maybe a deity like Morpheus kind of effectively brought into our spiritual work? Like what practices?
Well, dream walking.
Hmm?
Dream walking is one, for good or bad. You could use it. You could work with Morpheus to assist in nightmares. Someone who has consistent night terrors or nightmares, to alleviate those.
Yeah. You were yawning, and it's not even like late. Why are you yawning? It's something about the podcast. You just this bores you, I think.
No, it doesn't bore me.
What about like something like lucid dreaming?
Lucid dreaming would be really, really good.
Or what about like astral travel?
Astral travel would be good. Something about making dreams reality as well, mirroring dreams into reality.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned a moment ago that he's kind of more of a primordial kind of a god. And I mentioned a moment ago that those gods can be kind of a little intimidating. And I think really in maybe just touching back on or clarifying that a little bit more, I think what I meant by that is when we work with those spirits, those kinds of spirits, I think that though they have an understanding and they can appreciate humanity, like they understand, they know, they recognize us, they know who and what we are, right? I think that because they're just a bit more removed of us, I find that they don't tend to be as they're not as easy to work with.
No,
like it takes a little extra work to kind of attract their attention.
Yeah, well, it's just like Hecate.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, and she's a primordial goddess, but also I wanted to say these are not spirits that I think are ever really in a position for us to like control, or not control. What am I trying to say? These are spirits that when they show up, they're not going to do necessarily what you want them to do. They're going to do what they understand or can see is better for you.
Yeah.
Or best for you.
Yeah.
Right? So anyway, a little bit on Morpheus. So cool spirit. But I would say kind of specifically for those components of spiritual practice. All right. I wanted to move on. Oh, did you have something?
No.
Okay.
I just went,
Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit. One of our other listeners contacted us to ask us to talk a little bit about things like Sabbats and the acknowledgement of the will of the year.
Okay.
And they mentioned specifically, if I understood their question correctly, I think that they were kind of indicating in the way that they could their message.
I read this question.
Did you?
Yeah, it was basically they were asking about how we as witches and practitioners or pagans, though I don't consider myself a pagan, would incorporate seasonal practices into our spiritual work without following the Wiccan, specifically Wiccan Wheel of the Year, or as it was laid forth by Wiccans, traditional Wiccans. And I think that's actually really important, because one of the things that I find a lot of, and we've even had this interaction in the shop, is we've had people like older generational pagans and witches and Wiccans in the shop with newer seekers in the shop. And it's close to a Sabbath, and they're like, oh no, you have to celebrate each Sabbath, and it has to be Beltane. And I'm sitting here looking at this person who is obviously not of UK descent, and they're like, what's Beltane? So I think it's actually a really good thing to do. I'll kind of sort of spearhead this, since I have a lot of experience with the Wiccan Sabbats. With Wiccan Sabbats, we have 8, 4 major, 4 minor. And if you look at them, they're going to match a lot of the seasonal tides that we see just in cultures all over the world. You have Samhain or Shadowfest or Tenebris. You have Yule or Christmas or whatever. You have Imbolc. You have Lunasa, Litha, Beltane, Mabon. I think I got them all. But you have those ones that have been laid out. And really what we're doing when we...
There are a lot of others.
There are a lot of others that aren't just those.
Those are just the ones that have been popularized by Wicca.
Exactly. And so there are a lot of others, and depending on what your practice is, that's how you're going to want to kind of center that. But also, if you don't have a particular practice, then what you want to do is you want to build a practice around following the tides of the seasons, which is essentially what they are. So you look at the 4 seasons, and you work with the energies that are within that. Obviously, when we move into darker times, it's going to be a lot more about healing, safety, protection, keeping things together, keeping things close. As you move forward into the light times, you're looking at more ecstatic work, more outside work, more warmth, more focus on prosperity and giving and stuff like that. And so if you as a witch are wanting to acknowledge the tides,
and you don't need to.
And you don't need to.
You don't need to. This is a pagan thing, not
yes.
a witch thing.
Yes, but if you as a witch or a pagan want to acknowledge the tides of the seasons without being tied to something as esoteric as the will of the year, even though it's not really that esoteric, but like as structures will of the year, then go ahead and do that. One of my favorite books actually about this is Walking the Tides by Nigel G. Pearson. Will you see we have that book somewhere over there? I think it might actually be in the shop.
We do not.
But Walking the Tides by Nigel G. Pearson obviously centers around more UK-based stuff and UK-based tides, but he does talk in that book about tapping into the energies of the earth and the seasons and actually utilizing them for your magical practice, for your spiritual practice, and figuring out how to kind of get those things going. And so I always acknowledge equinoxes and solstices. I don't really we have our coven specific things, but I'm not going to talk about those. But when I was Wiccan, I honored all those Sabbats, and it was a lot of fucking work because sometimes it's like you're doing one every fucking month. Sometimes,
well, you do average like every month and a half.
Yeah, and yeah. It's a great paganistic thing where you gather with your community or your coven or your people and do these things, but it's all centered around the common will of the year that we focus on right now is actually an old fertility cult cycle, and it's centered around a god and a goddess, and as the god dies, he as he gets older he impregnates the goddess, and then as he dies or as he gets older she gives birth to this child, and this child grows, and then as and there's a fat battle between
becomes the new god.
Yes, and it's just a constant cycle. And
well, that also had influence. We talk about like old pagan fertility cults. I think people hear that a lot, and that can also be a bit confusing because when we talk about pagan fertility cults, we're not talking about there's the god cycle, certainly. And and we know that also has a lot to do with the seasons as they affect humanity. But a lot of that was also like really kind of just based around like agriculture.
Yes.
We plant our seeds in spring.
Yep.
Right. And we also acknowledge Beltane, and depending on how your culture acknowledged Beltane, you were planting seeds in other ways.
Yes.
Man to woman.
Yes.
So that's kind of what when we talk about fertility cults, that's kind of what they mean. There's a whole lot going on there. It's not just about like people like fucking in the woods.
No. Yeah. It's agricultural, and that's what the current will of the year is still focused around. And as much as I can say like it's a good structure, what
I was just thinking about that, and I was thinking particularly these days when we have a lot of people that are like looking at issues around like heteronormativity, like the will of the year is like very heteronormative.
Yes, it is. The will of the year is very much about duality.
Yes. And
light, dark,
men
masculine,
and women
feminine.
getting it on.
Yes. And so in your own practice, you don't need to do that. If you want a really good book, Walking the Tides is good. Year of the Witch is also a really good one. Seasons of the Witch is also a good one. So if you're looking for a way to kind of incorporate the seasonal energies into your practice, those are going to be some good books. One of the things that I like to do is usually around the equinoxes or the solstices, I take some time to key in to the energy around me, the seasonal energies. And the way that I do that is I follow a grounding exercise that I did on the podcast. But while I'm doing that, and my roots are down and I have branches extended, I am letting the seasonal winds or the seasonal energies kind of blow through those branches, and I'm visualizing and connecting and letting that energy kind of move through me, which is why, yes, I'm a tree in the wind. Oh no. So please don't sue us. So as we're doing this, and you take that and you kind of run with that energy and you feel that energy course through you, that's one of the reasons why sometimes the seasonal incense that I make in the shop are going to be different. There are some that I stick to because I've had death threats from customers. Like, you'll love it. I can't change that no matter what. If I change it, people will punch me in the throat, and I just don't want to deal with that. The Shadowfest slash Samhain, can't change it. People love it, can't change it. But other ones, I will switch because I key into the tides of the seasons and the feel of how it moves, and I base it around that. Because you could have one summer that's going to be really, really hot, and the energies that are coming through aren't necessarily hot energies. They're very calm, very cool, very docile energies. So as a witch, it is up to you to build your practices around those. It is your responsibility to do that if you choose to. You don't need to. You don't even need to acknowledge full moons and dark moons if you don't want to. Just like you don't have to acknowledge gods at all. Remember that paganism and witchcraft are separate. They are different things. No, folk magic is not paganism. Folk magic is folk magic. And I've drilled this into my Awakening the Witch students so hard, and I still had people on
painful
on the midterm in the Awakening the Witch go, I don't know. And I'm like, paganism, you are worshiping gods. You are a polytheist worshiping gods. Whatever gods those are, you are worshiping them, which means you are offering and bowing on bended knee and praying to them.
Can you be pagan and not be theistic?
No.
At all.
I don't think so. Are you asking if you could be a polytheist? Can you be a pagan, which by definition, and in the umbrella term, where you believe and worship multiple deities and gods?
Well, I think the old definition of pagan,
old definition of pagan means you're a country bumpkin.
As pagani, as like the root of that word coming out of the Mediterranean, really just meant that you basically, if you were a pagan, you just didn't worship the same gods that the elites did.
Yeah,
like you didn't worship the established gods. You didn't practice your spirituality in the same way. So I think that's one of the other reasons why over the years you and I have been like meaning to veer away from the term pagan, particularly as witches, because to identify as a pagan, basically, and I know the word has been repurposed, and there are many people out there.
Yes, now it just means you're not Christian.
Exactly. But and there are a lot of people out there that like, well, I identify as a pagan, and that's fine, absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
Identify as a pagan, no problem, right? You can even identify as a pagan and a witch. Hey,
yeah.
we don't care. Great, that's great for you. But we've talked in the past, I think, a bit about we need to kind of veer away, or we need to at least be very honest with ourselves around the word pagan, the historical association there, because once upon a time that was a term or a label put upon you to mark you as like outsider, or to mark you as other or less than, or someone who didn't worship the right way.
Yes, it was the folk people who were poor, and so for me that word pagan comes with a lot of like scarcity and poverty, and I don't necessarily like that, which is why I'm not going to claim that. So whereas witch is empowering, and I need some money, I'm going to cast a fucking spell for it, and if God wants to help out, cool, but I don't need a fucking God to do some spells.
There you go. So bottom line, people can, in essence, they can acknowledge these things or not. They can work with the will of the year and the Sabbaths or not. And if they do choose to, to acknowledge them in some capacity, they really, even within that decision, they can still acknowledge those and work with those however they want to.
That's correct. I mean, obviously, if you're working with the will of the year set forth by Wicca, you need to understand that Beltane is English and Yule is Germanic, and they are not the same.
I mean, a lot of them, like Ostara is also
Ostara is Germanic. Samhain is Welsh / Gaelic.
Lunasa is also, I think, Gaelic.
Yeah, right? So it's very much like it is a modgepodge of different cultures because that's what Gerald Gardner did.
But they don't call it Lunasa in Wicca, do they? Call it Lammas?
Lammas or Lunasa, they're the same thing.
Well, I know, but like in Wicca, don't they call it Lammas?
It depends on your tradition, depends on the coven.
I always loved that because I always pictured like llamas. It's like, oh, it's autumn. We're getting to the end of summer. It's time for llamas.
Yes, I scheduled a llamas ritual.
I love llamas.
And
they're cute.
No one signed up for it because they didn't know what llamas was, even though llamas and Lunasa are the same thing.
Which also cracks me
llamas because
these are all the same people probably that are identifying as Wiccans. And it's like, but are you? Because you didn't even know what llamas was.
Lunasa is the celebration specifically of the god, Lu. Yeah. Whereas llamas is a little bit more generic.
And you make bread.
Both times you make bread.
That's what I mean. Like, like you make bread.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is a good time to make bread.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, because you've harvested all your grain, right? Or are actively harvesting.
One of the last Sabbats that Fluffy and I did together was Llamas / Nasa for our old coven, and we made Swedish breakfast bread for everyone. We braided it. It's fun.
Yeah. Okay. It's cool how many different cultures have like the braided bread. Like, you have like challah, and then like even like in the Mediterranean, you do like the egg bread.
Yeah.
Braid it. Yeah. That's kind of cool.
I do like challah.
All cultures and their fancy braided breads. Yes.
So it is up to you on how you acknowledge, if you acknowledge the Sabbath, the will of the year, the seasonal cycles. Most witches are going to acknowledge the seasonal cycles simply because you do feel a shift in the energy. And it can affect your magic. I mean, it's not that like during the dark time you can't do prosperity work, but you're going to find that it's going to be much more effective during the dark time, darker times when things go quiet, where you're going to find like an uptick in your ability to do baneful stuff and protection and stuff like that. Just simply because like
what
the energy is there.
Well, I think like the dark time of the year, I think, and just to be clear, for maybe people who are joining us and who are not familiar with that. So the dark time of the year is in essence going to kind of be, say, like Samhain.
The dark time of the year starts at on the autumnal.
Well, it's the autumnal equinox, yeah. But even then, depending on the area of the world that you're in, like here, like I mean, it still felt like summer well into early October here. And
thank you, global warming.
So yeah, right. Yeah, thank you, global warming. Anyway, so I think that really, rather than focusing on the dates specifically, I think it comes down to actually the way that we see the seasons moving. So the dark time of the year is going to really be roughly like late September, early October-ish, we'll say, kind of through to February of the following year, where we see like Imbolc pop up, right? Or other days, we don't acknowledge Imbolc, but other days, around that time. And that's a time of year, in talking about prosperity as an example. Like, I think that during that time, because the dark time is really kind of meant to be more for like introspection, healing, personal healing, reflection, these kinds of things, shadow work. I think that during that time of year, if you were going to be focusing on prosperity specifically, it would also be a really good time of year to be sitting down and actually looking at like, what are my personal associations of prosperity?
Yeah.
Like, when I think about this, when I think about myself as a prosperous person, when I think about the energy of whatever that is for you, money, health, because prosperity is a lot of different things, right? Prosperity is just the energy of how we live the best life, in essence, right?
Yeah.
But I think to also be sitting down and thinking about like, what does this mean to me? What do I really truly need in my life to feel a sense of prosperity? Because I think people, like, and they hear that word and they go right to dollars, or money, and it's like, no, prosperity comes in so many forms, right? And
prosperous health,
and that's another huge component, I think, of dark time, kind of energy,
Okay. So there you go. I hope this helps the listener, whoever they were.
Yes. Well, that's part of the name. Anyway, all right, I had one more thing, and this is going to be one of the other things that I'm going to talk about today that's going to sound a little bitchy, but I feel justified in bringing this up because this is another example, I think, of how we've seen New Age ideologies and light workers, or self-proclaimed light workers usually. Kat this morning was telling me, Kat is the matron of our coven. She was telling me this morning that I should not crap on the New Agers and the light workers too much because they are also part of kind of the alternative spiritual community. And as witches, we want to try to welcome these people in. And I absolutely agree with that. Everybody's welcome at the table, right? But if you're going to come and sit with us at the table, don't bring all of your New Age light worker bullshit with you. Okay. And I guess what I mean by that is if your spirituality is based off of old systems of white supremacy, cultural appropriation, philosophies coming from self-proclaimed gurus who really are operating primarily within the sphere of unverified personal gnosis, if that's where a lot of your stuff is coming from, if those are the foundations of your spiritual practice, you, my friend, are a light worker and a New Ager. And there's nothing wrong with those things necessarily, because being involved in those things still indicates that you are spiritually evolving and growing. But I think that's kind of where I feel, or I struggle with light workers and New Agers a lot is, as people, they can be just fine, but when you start to talk to them and you start to kind of get into some of their actual belief systems, it becomes clear very quickly that they're still spiritual children in essence.
Okay.
Which is difficult because they think they're like the top of the rung. Like they think they're the top of the ladder
like most
related
children.
to their spirituality when they're like still like first rung, first step. Right. And that's okay. They'll get there. Right. And we all have room to grow. Right. Me too. Though I like to insist that I know everything. I will admit now that I do not. Anyway, so let me bring back to my point. Okay. I wanted to talk about light language.
Ugh.
Okay. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how there's like this glare here. I'm just going to position my head here because there's like this sunspot here. There's this the reason this is something I want to talk about is that in just the last 3 or 4 days, I have come across light language happening or have seen light language being done in some capacity like multiple times. And I'll go months and not see that being done or hear anything about it. And there'll be this part of me that's like, I get kind of lulled into a false sense of security. Right? like, oh, good, maybe it's finally going away. Maybe people are finally waking up. But no, here we are. And so anyway, I wanted to talk about this because I wanted to express to those of you who join us that light language is a con. It is not real. Okay. And I wanted to explain why that is my opinion and my position on that. And I want to provide information to not only basically to validate my opinion and really kind of the science and the belief behind light language, or why it can't be real. It doesn't work the way that people want you to think it does. Okay, so starting with that, okay, and I'm going to refer to my notes again here, okay, but we know from scientific evidence, and we have to root our spiritual practices in science. We have to be able to do that. Does that mean that science holds all the answers? Absolutely not, right? But we need to be able to find some scientific measure at the root of what we're doing spiritually. We must be able to do that, because if we don't, we run into trouble. Those are always situations where we completely detach and we find ourselves falling into situations of spiritual bypass and spiritual psychosis. So we need to hold on to those roots, right? And the best way to do that is to look for the science or evidence that we see within science, if there is any, that can potentially explain how these things work. And I'm not talking about the science behind light language, because there isn't any. Okay, because it's not real, it doesn't exist, it's not a real thing. Okay, but the science behind light and sound. And in going there, I want to specify that science has actually kind of shown us that light waves and sound waves can interact. They can. Sound waves can affect light waves. But the only time that that's really happening is in situations where the sound waves are at a frequency or have hit a decibel that is going to be impossible for the human voice to replicate. Like, we do not have the ability with this to create or to replicate a sonic boom.
No, we don't.
Right. Well, you're almost there. Mr. Opera Singer.
We do sing at like 144
There you go.
decibels,
It
I
gets
think.
pretty intense, right? Anyway, so science has shown us that light waves can be affected by sound waves, but this only happens when sound waves hit frequencies or decibels that we're not going to be able to reproduce with the human voice. Okay. So when and beyond that, when sound waves affect light waves, you're not going to typically see, and this is again the science of how these things work. You're not going to typically see sound waves focusing light waves in one particular direction or in the context of spirituality with one particular intent. When sound waves interact with light waves in the capacity that they can, what usually happens is the light waves diffract. And what happens is at the moment that the sound waves kind of line up, or they kind of interfere, I shouldn't say interfere, interact with sound waves and light waves interact, the sound, the energy, the force of the sound, whatever that might be, diffracts the light waves, and the light waves go, and they kind of just diffract, or they just kind of from all over the place. And so basically, like, they kind of splinter, or they kind of fragment, depending on the different waves, because we all know each like we associate light waves with color, right? And we all know that each of those has like a particular frequency, right? Or vibration. And so they diffract. Okay, which means that you're not really seeing a concentrated or a focused source of light. That's not possible. Okay, so there's a little bit of the science, and please understand, this is my layman's terms for how these things work, right? I'm sure there are people out there, scientists out there, who are much more knowledgeable than I am, who would have all of the exact terminology for how these things work, right? But that, in essence, is how sound waves and light waves interact, right? And one of the reasons why I again say light language is a con. It's not real. It can't be. Okay.
All I'm going to say is, for people who are trying so hard to get away from Christianity, they sure be speaking in tongues a lot.
Well, and I wanted to talk about that too, but before I get there, I wanted to add to the scientific piece, okay, that we know we do have evidence that sound waves can facilitate healing. We know that. Okay, like science has confirmed that. Okay. But again, those sound waves are typically happening at frequencies that we are not able to produce with the human voice.
Most definitely.
Okay, so once again, somebody who is clicking and humming and doing God knows what else, that sound is not doing anything to heal you. Nothing. It can't. Okay, so let's talk about that. Okay, because light language, I think really what it comes down to is that it is, in essence, it's a corruption of a much older spiritual practice. And I say older because it goes all the way back to records that we have of very ancient spiritual practices. It's something that is still done today, but the actual term is glossolalia.
Glossolalia.
Okay, or as the religious call it, speaking in tongues, right? And glossolalia is still commonly done. To this day, you still see this happening commonly, and it shows up. I think most people will be most familiar with the concept of glossolalia, or speaking in tongues. You'll be most familiar with it, again, coming from Christianity, right? Particularly fundamentalist Christianity, where, like they're taken over by the Holy Spirit, right? And the Spirit is moving through them, and they're while they're casting demons out of their parishioners, right? Or their congregants, right? And and I'll be
they're
honest,
bringing down clouds.
And I'll be honest, half the time of that, I see things like that. I'm like, I don't necessarily believe in that either. Okay, at least not in the way that I see them doing it, right? But whatever, right? But glossolalia is something that also happens in folk magic practices, in traditional witchcraft practices, and in some of our oldest spiritual practices, ATRs, the family of practices that would be identified as ATRs, we still see glossolalia happening in those practices, even as they are done today, when people are ridden by spirit. And so I wanted to talk about this a little bit, because there is big distinction between glossolalia and what light workers or new agers would identify as light language, okay? Specifically in purpose, not only in how it happens, but in purpose. Okay? The purpose of glossolalia, to be honest, is really just to become a channel to the power of another spirit, okay? To become a vessel, or in I would say, in some sense, maybe a messenger, right? Depending on exactly who you're talking to and what's going on, right? Okay, so it isn't about the person in that situation. And I think that's one of the other issues that I have with a lot of people that I see doing light language kind of work, is that in doing that work, it becomes really clear to that it's not even really about like I'm the vessel. This is something that moves through me. This is the will of another spirit who actually does have within its power the ability to enact healing, not through the use of light necessarily, but because it's a spirit and they can alter energies, right? But it becomes less about being the vessel and the channel and kind of more about like, look at me. Look at me. I'm your savior. It's that Messiah complex thing that pops up in a lot of practitioners, particularly New Agers. So you're just a conduit when you are working, when you are someone who is experiencing not light language, but you are someone who is experiencing glossolalia. You are just the conduit for other spirit or other intelligence or other power. It's not about you. Okay. Okay, and I think that that's the big distinction, right? I want to clarify again, just because I know that there are people who will watch this and they'll go, well, I mean, the distinction there could be it seems like it could be very minimal. And while I will agree, I also do want to clarify that before anybody goes off on a light language is just channeling, right? Because that's another thing that I've heard. A lot of people, when I've talked with them about light language as a phenomenon or as a belief, in something that people do, they've been like, well, it's just a form of channeling. Okay. And that's not true either. Okay. And the reason I say that is because when glossolalia, real glossolalia occurs, okay, the human in that situation is not typically in control of what is actually happening in the moment. It is the other spiritual energy that is in control. Okay. That's why they call it being ridden by spirit.
Yeah.
Or being filled with the Holy Spirit or whatever it is, right? Whatever it is, like you're not in control. Okay. And because of that, it would be very difficult, I think, in that kind of situation for the practitioner, the person who is doing the light language. They're not consciously going to be aware. They should not have the level of conscious awareness and control over how that is manifesting to be able to direct that in one conscious current of healing.
Well, no, because if you're doing this and you're being ridden by spirit, deity, whatever it is, the whole concept that of glossolalia is that the power of that spirit is so vast that human language cannot comprehend it as well. And so as it comes out, it just comes out as what it is.
Exactly. That's why they call it speaking. One of the reasons why they call it speaking in tongues is because you're no longer speaking human language. Like you're no longer speaking a language that you are consciously aware of or that you speak. You are speaking the tongues of spirit.
And it's usually fairly ecstatic. It's very rare with glossolalia to be calm, because it hardly ever is. Because what has happened is you've worked yourself up into such an ecstatic state. You've tranced, and then once you've tranced, you're no longer in control.
You're being ridden by spirit. And that's why, I guess, again, just kind of reaffirm what I was saying. That's why I draw a distinction between the legitimate glossolalia experience and what New Agers call light language, because they're different. Most of the New Agers I see doing light language are fully conscious in the moment. They have to be, because they're there to take the money. And they should be paid for what they're doing if what they're doing is legitimate spiritual work. But clicking your tongue, you do a really good impersonation of this, and I can, but clicking your tongue. That's it.
I just did light language. Do you feel healed?
I'm sure you all feel so much better now, right?
That was channeled from Archangel Metatron.
Metatron, really? Damn, I can't even get him to return my calls. Anyway, so that was a fairly accurate representation or impersonation of light language, as I've seen it done by many New Age practitioners. But that is not doing anything.
It's New Age ASMR.
And in that situation, and that's exactly it. It's New Age ASMR. It can be entertaining to watch. Maybe.
It just makes
But
me feel uncomfortable.
it really it does. To me, I think that sense of discomfort that I get, I think what it is it's that part of me that like looks at that, and with having some of the knowledge that we have on how energy works and things like this work, and really the roots of things like this as they originate rather than what they're made to be or how they're corrupted by New Age philosophy. I look at that and I'm like, why do I want to watch this show when I know that the whole purpose of this is just to take advantage of me? Exactly. And I know that's a very cynical way to look at something like that, right?
Mm.
Well, hi, I'm a cynic. Um, but it's messed up to me. And I think it's just one of the latest examples of how there are people out there who, between needing to show the world how special they are and needing to, I don't know, and we all have bills to pay, right? So, I mean, God, don't get me wrong, for people to be charging for things like this, I mean, we live in a
$200 an hour.
we live in a capitalist society, right? A capitalist world. So, I mean, you got bills to pay and kids to feed, right? And you're desperate, you're gonna pull any kind of weird trick out of your ass to make that money, right? So while I can admire their enterprise, I just want to again make it very clear that they're not really doing anything that is of benefit to anybody. If you need energetic healing, go see a Reiki practitioner because what they're doing is actually real.
And actually, there has been some science and research that has been done on the benefits of Reiki.
Go see, there are any of a number of alternative kinds of healing modalities that I can think of that actually have history, that are it's I just the light language thing just really bothers me. I think at the end of it is it's not only is it a lie, but I hate seeing people get caught up in that kind of thing because I find that is kind of like just the first step, or that's one of the first things that can happen that can kind of like really deter the rest of their spiritual practice
and lead them down a path of spiritual psychosis bypass. Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Yeah.
Anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
I've had legitimate experiences with glossolalia because of my mama, even my nona. I think there have been some rituals where I've had a glossolalia experience. And only reason I know is because there's like blips of that ritual that I can't remember.
Yeah.
And
well, I mean, that's transferred, right?
Yeah.
Legitimate glossolalia is, I would say, definitely is a channeled experience. Mm-hmm. Light language is not.
So, anyway.
So, Austin, you pulled out a deck of cards.
I did. So we talked about the seasons, and one of the ways that I've actually really enjoyed kind of keying into the energy of the season is with these oracle decks, Seasons of the Witch. This is the Yule Oracle, so it's the season right now.
Are you on the payroll of the person who creates these decks? Because you talk about these decks a lot.
No, I'm not. But if they want to put me on their payroll, I'd be more than happy to accept that. They're a really good deck just because they really do kind of capture that energy. I mean, the Mabon Oracle has like this very like Thanksgiving, very like
they're very pretty. These
decks,
they're put together very well.
And they really do capture the energy. So I figured I'd pull one card for those who are listening. It is just going to be a little here, some information to help get you through the holidays coming up, because Thanksgiving is next week, Turkey Day is next week.
Oh God, yes.
And then I'm gonna do a little promo on some of our classics, and then we'll wrap it up. So the card is ceremony. Okay, I'll read the little thing that's on the card to you, and then I'll do my interpretation for you.
Is that a cloaked figure?
Yes, it's a cloaked figure who is I cannot show entirely because there are nakedness involved. I call upon those heralds of winter, dimming light for better sight. Hear thy praise spilling from thy lips, a spell I'll cast for thy spirits in me. So what this card is saying is like, if you're really nervous about the upcoming holidays, whether that's Turkey Day or Christmas or whatever that is, do some work to help protect your energy and protect your space. Do some ceremony to help honor you and your spirits. So that way you have a little bit of energetic buffer between you and some of that energy that you're going to have to be dealing with. There are multiple ways you could do this. We have a podcast around it. One of my favorite ways is to just create like a tea of like protective or strengthening herbs and then strain it and use it as a spray. Florida water is always going to be a good option. And the Marine lemons will work. If you're going to do Marine lemons, make sure you add some other herbal components to it and pray over it and charge it so that way it actually holds a charge. We do sell the Marine lemons in the shop. We've already prayed over all of them, so they are programmed. So that's what that card is, ceremony. Take some time to do some prep for your spirit and for your space in preparation for the holidays coming up.
Word.
Okay. Now I'm going to pull out my phone and we have some really awesome things coming up. So we have the mediumship study group on November 15th, which is tomorrow at 6 p.m.
Which is in person only.
Which is in person only.
And if you're in the area,
come join us. It's free. Show up. You should be great. The 16th, we have a Hecate's Night, Rite of Her Sacred Fires. All proceeds of this are going to go to a donation to help homeless youth this winter. I'm going to be leading that ritual, and it is the Rite of Her Sacred Fires by Sudita Dieste.
Is it the 16th?
Yeah.
You're right, because that is like the night.
Yeah.
I do want to clarify that is kind
historically
of
that is
a newer thing. Contemporarily, the November 16th association with Hecate, like that's a much more contemporary kind
it's
of.
It's very contemporary. Yeah. But during that rite, I'll be evoking her. If you want to come to this, call the shop, get on the list. You have to bring an offering. I will not provide an offering for you. If you want to show up and connect to the goddess Hecate, show up with a fucking bulb of garlic. It doesn't matter what you bring, okay?
What about all the vampires out there? What do they bring?
Garlic. They can get over it.
Oh, God.
So it's not my responsibility to bring an offering to the goddess for you. That's your responsibility. Donations are suggested. I've been doing a $10 suggested donation simply because it's getting colder in Utah, and there are a lot of LGBTQIA plus homeless youth and and just homeless youth in general.
I mean, yeah, but that money is going to our current fundraising efforts.
Yeah, it's going to our current fundraising efforts, and we match. So, if you're around, come to that. It's going to be at 8 p.m., I do believe. Okay. Go onto our Facebook. It's not on our website, but go onto our Facebook page, Cat and Cauldron. You'll be able to see the upcoming event. I do believe it's 8 p.m. just because I work that day and I think we're closing the shop. So, and then we have the Witches Mass on the 19th at 11 a.m., which is also free. This is the last Witches Mass. We are no longer doing them. It was originally someone else's idea to do the Witches Mass, and this person never actually did it. And so it kind of fell to me. And while I love doing them, I also like having a day off. So if you want to come to the Witches Mass, great. Awesome. We'll do some energy work. We'll do some prep to get you ready. I would pump Mike's Firesider class, but it's only available in person and it's capped. It's full now. We have a crystal ball reading class on November 20th at 6 p.m.
Which is also only in person.
I'm
looking at a lot of what we got coming up over the next week, and a lot of this is kind of only available in person.
Well, that's fine because we have people local who listen to our podcast. We have Energetic Reset, right?
Study groups available.
The Basic Witch Study Group is available online. That's November 29th at 6 p.m. If you want to do that, you have to give us your email. We cannot just pull your email out of the ether and hope for the best, We have an Energetic Reset rite on November 26th at 5 p.m., the full moon rites, obviously. And then we go into December and we have a lot of great stuff coming up. But more about that.
The Energetic Reset rite, just real quick, the reason that we're doing that is many people go and spend a lot of time with family around Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process of doing that, they pick up a lot of like nastiness.
Yeah.
And we're all aware of the idea of dealing with toxic family around the holidays. So the Energetic Reset rite is going to be a good one because it's meant specifically to help people to kind of like get back to center.
Yeah.
And let go of all that crap that they picked up from like racist uncle whoever, or Trump supporting aunt whoever, religious grandma whoever, right? So
so if any of those you want to come to, most of them are not available online, unfortunately, but if you're local or you want to see if they're available online, give us a call. We'll be more than happy to answer that question for you.
Contact us and let us know that you have an interest, because that means that if we have enough people from other areas express an interest in something, that gives us incentive the next time we do that thing to like actually make it available online.
We never know what you're going to like if you don't tell us, right? Or what you're interested in. We're not mind readers. We might be psychic, but we're not mind readers. So those are just a few things coming up. Um, we hope that you have a good holiday. We will probably not have a podcast episode due to it being
I think
Thanksgiving
I'm
next
gonna
week.
probably do like a mini episode next week on Tuesday, just to talk about like a couple of things and maybe do a little bit of housekeeping. Housekeeping. I don't know why I said that way. Housekeeping. Um, so there will probably be like a mini episode next week.
Okay. Well, other than that, happy witching, and we'll yak at you later. Stay salty.
Bye.